Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and every day I get to share a piece of history that I think you'll find as fascinating as I do. Today we're heading to the Western Front in Belgium and France on Christmas Eve, 1914, the night that soldiers on both sides of the trenches, exhausted from 5 months of brutal warfare, spontaneously stopped fighting and celebrated Christmas together. And here's what fascinates me about this moment. For a few hours, ordinary soldiers, German, British, French, defied their commanders, put down their weapons, and reminded each other that they were human beings, not just enemies. Understanding why the Christmas truce happened and why it could never happen again teaches us something profound about human goodness, about the machinery of war that turns ordinary people into killers, and about whether we're condemned to keep creating systems that force good people to do terrible things to each other. Picture this. It's Christmas Eve, 1914, along the Western Front. British, French, and German soldiers have been fighting for 5 months. Since August, when the war everyone thought would be over by Christmas began. They're living in trenches, cold, wet, exhausted. No man's land, the shell-cratered wasteland between the opposing trenches, is sometimes just 50 yards wide. You can hear the enemy talking, listen to them singing, hear them living and dying just yards away. As darkness falls on Christmas Eve, something remarkable begins to happen. German soldiers place candles on their parapets. They start singing Stille Nacht, Silent Night. British soldiers hear it and join in, singing in English. Then they start calling to each other across no man's land. Merry Christmas, Frohe Weihnachten. And then, one by one, soldiers climb out of their trenches. They walk into no man's land, unarmed, nervous but curious. German soldiers meet British soldiers. They shake hands. They exchange cigarettes and food. They show each other photographs of their families. They bury their dead together. In some places, they play football, impromptu soccer matches in the cratered mud. For a few hours, or in some places a few days, enemies become human to each other. They realize the man across no man's land isn't a monster. He's a soldier like them, cold and tired and missing home, who wants nothing more than to survive and go home to his family. Here's the thing that I always wonder about. What was going through these soldiers' minds? They'd been ordered to kill each other. They'd watched their friends die, and yet when given the chance, their instinct wasn't to hate, but to connect. What does that tell us about human nature versus what war demands of us? Let me build the clock for you, because understanding why the Christmas truce happened and why it was never allowed to happen again reveals something crucial about the difference between the humanity of soldiers and the machinery of war that controls them. World War I was supposed to be over quickly. Everyone thought it would last a few months at most. But by Christmas 1914, both sides were dug into trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. Millions of men were living in mud, facing enemy fire, watching friends die. For what? None of them could really explain it anymore. Here's what the evidence tells us. The Christmas truce wasn't ordered from above. It wasn't official. It was spontaneous. Soldiers on both sides independently decided they'd had enough killing for Christmas. Some accounts suggest it started with German troops who had a tradition of celebrating Christmas with candles and carols. But British and French soldiers responded eagerly. Combat soldiers understand these truths. The cold, the fear, the exhaustion, the knowledge that you might die any moment. And in that context, the choice these soldiers made to see each other as human, that's extraordinary. Because when you look at the evidence, the letters soldiers wrote home, the photographs taken, the accounts from both sides, you see something important. The truce revealed the disconnect between what war demanded and what soldiers wanted. The soldiers exchanged addresses, promising to write after the war. They talked about their families, their homes, their hopes. They discovered they had more in common with each other than with the officers and politicians who'd sent them to fight. They realized that the man they'd been ordered to kill was just another human being, trapped in the same nightmare. But here's what happened next. Military leadership on both sides was horrified. This wasn't how war worked. You couldn't fraternize with the enemy. You couldn't see them as human. If you did, how could you kill them the next day? So the orders came down. No more truces. Soldiers were told to fire on anyone approaching from enemy lines, even if they came peacefully. Artillery bombardments were scheduled for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in the following years to prevent truces from forming. Officers threatened court-martials for fraternization, and it worked. The Christmas truce of 1914 was never repeated. By 1915, the war had become too brutal, too bitter. Gas attacks, mass casualties, the grinding horror of trench warfare. By the following Christmas, soldiers weren't looking for truces. They'd learned to see the enemy as the enemy, not as fellow humans. Think about what this reveals. The Christmas truce shows that left to their own devices, soldiers might find ways not to fight. But the machinery of war, the officers, the generals, the governments, they need soldiers to keep fighting. So they have to prevent humanity from breaking out. They have to keep soldiers from seeing enemies as people, not as enemies. We're still creating those same conditions today. And I think this is where the story becomes especially relevant for us right now. Look at how we wage war now. We use drones piloted from thousands of miles away. We drop bombs on targets we can't see. We fight through technology that creates distance between soldiers and the people they kill. And one reason for that distance is precisely what the Christmas truce revealed. When soldiers see enemies as human, it becomes harder to kill them. Here's what troubles me. The Christmas truce showed us that even in war, ordinary people tend toward humanity and connection. But we've built military systems specifically designed to prevent humanity from emerging. We train soldiers to dehumanize enemies. We create psychological distance through technology. We foster us versus them thinking. We do everything we can to prevent another Christmas truce. Think about it. The military learned from 1914 that soldiers who see each other as human won't fight as effectively. So, modern military training includes dehumanization techniques. You don't kill a person, you neutralize a target. You don't fight human beings with families. You engage hostiles. The language itself is designed to create distance. The pattern shows up beyond warfare. In any conflict, we dehumanize the other side. In political disputes, we demonize opponents. In social conflicts, we reduce people to stereotypes. We do this because it's easier to fight people we see as less than human. The Christmas truce reminds us what happens when we let that dehumanization fall away. We connect, we empathize, we find common ground. Here's what the evidence from 1914 tells us. Humans are capable of both extraordinary violence and extraordinary compassion, often toward the same people. The soldiers who participated in the Christmas truce went back to shooting at each other days later. They didn't become pacifists. They just had a moment where their humanity broke through the machinery of war. I find myself thinking about this a lot because I believe in fundamental human goodness. I believe most people given the choice, would rather connect than kill, would rather cooperate than fight. But we create systems, war, politics, economics, that force people into conflict. We build machinery that overrides our better instincts. Consider the position soldiers were in during the Christmas truce. For a few hours, they lived in a different world, a world where German and British soldiers could be friends, could share cigarettes and sing carols together. Then that world ended. They went back to their trenches, and they resumed killing each other. Because that's what the system demanded, even though their humanity had shown them another way was possible. The tragedy isn't just that the truce ended. The tragedy is that it had to be suppressed, that military leadership saw it as a threat rather than as a glimmer of hope, that the machinery of war couldn't tolerate a moment of peace breaking out. So as we think about that Christmas Eve in 1914, when soldiers climbed out of trenches and became human to each other, I think the question for us isn't about whether humanity exists. The truce proved it does. The question is why we keep building systems that suppress it, and whether we're condemned to keep creating wars that force good people to do terrible things. I respect those soldiers enormously. They showed courage by trusting their enemies. They showed humanity by seeing past the dehumanization their training had tried to instill. They showed wisdom by recognizing that the man across no man's land was just another person caught in the same nightmare. The pattern is clear. The Christmas truce wasn't an aberration. It was a glimpse of what humans naturally do when systems don't force them to fight. Left to themselves, soldiers from opposing sides found ways to connect, to help each other, to recognize their shared humanity. The aberration is war itself, the system that forces people to kill other people they have no personal reason to hate. Let's reflect on what we owe to those soldiers. We owe them the memory of what they showed us, that even in the worst circumstances, humanity can break through. We owe them an honest reckoning with the costs of war. And we owe them the effort to build a world where such moments aren't fleeting exceptions, but the norm. I always come back to this principle. Respect every person for who they are. The Christmas truce embodied that principle. German soldiers respected British soldiers. British soldiers respected German soldiers. For a few hours, they all respected each other's humanity. Then the machinery of war ground on, and that respect had to be suppressed so the killing could continue. We know humans are capable of this kind of connection, even across conflict lines. The Christmas truce proved it, but we keep building systems, military, political, social, that make such a connection impossible or dangerous. We keep choosing the machinery over the humanity. But here's what gives me hope. The Christmas truce happened. Despite orders, despite training, despite 5 months of brutal warfare, soldiers chose humanity. They proved it's possible. They showed that the human instinct toward connection and compassion can survive even war. That matters. That gives me hope that we're not condemned to endless conflict, that we're capable of seeing each other as human, even when systems tell us not to. The great philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And here's why that matters today. The Christmas truce of 1914 taught us that ordinary soldiers, when given the chance, choose humanity over hatred, connection over conflict, but that military systems must suppress this humanity to keep wars going. Yet we keep creating conditions for war, keep training soldiers to dehumanize enemies, and keep building barriers to seeing each other as human. We celebrate the Christmas truce as a beautiful anomaly while ensuring it can never happen again, using distance technology like drones, using dehumanizing language, and using propaganda that makes the enemy monstrous rather than human. If we cannot remember that the Christmas truce revealed the gap between human nature and what war demands, we're condemned to keep creating systems that force good people to fight each other while suppressing the moments when their shared humanity breaks through. The question isn't whether humans are capable of connection across conflict lines. 1914 proved we are. The question is whether we'll build a world that enables that connection or whether we'll keep suppressing it so wars can continue. I'm Richard Backus, and this is the Daily History Chronicle. Tomorrow, we'll explore another moment that shaped our world. Until then, think about what the Christmas truce reveals about human nature, about what systems force us to do versus what we'd choose on our own, and whether we're building connection or suppressing it. Because that's what Christmas Eve 1914 teaches us. Not just about one war, but about the eternal conflict between our humanity and the machinery that tries to make us forget it. To the soldiers who climbed out of trenches on Christmas Eve 1914, who chose to see enemies as humans, thank you for showing us what we're capable of, even when everything tells us to hate.